Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. We are back with one of our usual kind of injury roundups with a bit of a deeper analysis as well. This is the first one of 2022, but this is the second video of 2022. So if you want to see that, do click and have a look because we do a deep dive on Ben Chilwell, but also make sure to subscribe to the channel because, you know, the year has changed, but we have not. We're going to be doing our usual consistent content. And just before we get into it then, Ben, what has changed for you this year? We're 4 or 5 days into the new year. I mean, obviously all of your New Year's resolutions are on plan and you're just doing fantastic work as usual.
One of my resolutions was to give up podcasting, but hey, oh look what's happened.
It's got all right.
Yeah, look, I'm really excited for 2022. We've obviously launched the new website just before Christmas. So if you haven't seen that, premierinjuries.com, please check it out. There'll be loads of new stuff, lots of content, lots of data insights added to that. So I'm really excited to see how this little project advances over the course of the year. And yeah, indeed, if you have any comments or there's stuff that you would like to know, pop it in the box below. And like I say, me and Jason are always looking and we try to respond to as many questions as humanly possible as time permits.
And I think at the moment, time permits a little bit more because over the Christmas schedule, we were working really hard to keep everybody as up to date as possible, but we weren't able to kind of do a little bit more deep analysis as much as we wanted to. And like you said there, please do message us, whether it's on my Twitter, Ben's Twitter, in the comments below. We're all ears at the moment and we're going to try and do some really fantastic content. But we've got a few important topics to talk about today. Like I said, we've already done Chilwell, so check out that video. But there's another Chelsea defender that we do have to talk about. It's Reece James. Ben, what's the latest on that situation? When should we see him returning?
Always difficult with hamstring problems. Of course, it didn't look good. It never looks great when, you know, you see a player leaving the ground as Reece James did at Stamford Bridge on crutches. You knew then and you had a sort of inkling that you thought that it was a fairly serious setback. You know, the mechanism and the way he sort of grabbed his leg looked as if he was holding the sort of just behind the knee, the distal aspect of that hamstring. Now, if that's true, that might be an indication that there's sort of tendon involvement. Now, due to the complexities of that structure, then those tend to be, you know, the longer recovery periods. You know, my initial thoughts when that happened was 4 weeks. I think the reality is that could easily be extended to maybe around 6. And I would not be surprised if it did maybe extend slightly beyond that. So we're talking maybe a high grade 2 injury. Now, as it currently stands at the time of recording, you know, there's no indication that there's any kind of surgical involvement going to be required. So that, you know, in terms of a total rupture, that's, you know, that's ruled out, that which is good news. So that gives us an opportunity to maybe for Reece James to repair itself conservatively. And like I say, I think maybe 4 would be optimistic and you'd be very, very lucky. 6 is realistic. But, you know, if you want to err on the side of caution, then 6 to 8 weeks can't be ruled out.
And the thing is, as well, is maybe in a weird way, you know, I wouldn't wish this on any player, but it kind of comes at a goodish time for maybe FPL managers, those who are betting on the Premier League, those who are interested in Reece James himself, because they've got 2 difficult games now, Chelsea. They haven't been in the best of form. And then going from game week 24-25, they've got 2 blanks because they're at the Club World Cup. So people wouldn't have been too interested in Chelsea anyway till game week 26, February 19th anyway. But obviously with the timelines, he's going to be out for a bit of an extended period after that anyway. And the run of fixtures get a little bit easier during that game week 28-29 period anyway. So it might be an interesting one to keep an eye on. As we always say, though, because he has returned to play does not mean he will return to those peak levels just yet. It might take him a bit of time. But a certain situation that is very pressing for a team that a lot of people had their eyes on and were kind of quite positive about. They were thinking new manager bounce plus a new style. They're going to be fantastic. But Manchester United, they've fallen by the wayside. They're continuing to have really poor results. And now they've got a centre-back crisis, don't they, Ben?
They do, yes. Of course, we've seen the return of Phil Jones against Wolverhampton Wanderers on Monday evening. That was his first appearance. I think it was 707 days, so just shy of 2 years. And, great to see him back on the pitch, first and foremost. He's faced a lot of abuse. Let's not sugarcoat it, for these, perennial injury problems that have restricted him to such little game time. But, he went out there and he a great performance, arguably maybe one of Manchester United's best players on the night. But, is that maybe a slamming indictment more of not necessarily Phil Jones, but the rest of that United team as it currently stands?
It's an interesting analysis. Maybe we'll get into it in one of our other videos this week. But kind of going into it, Phil Jones, I don't know if people will bring him into their team. A lot of people brought Diego Dallo into their team for the same sort of reasons. Cheap starter, away into that Manchester United defence. But with the situation there, like you said, Jones' first time in nearly 2 years, he's playing for the club. That was necessitated by the fact that there were so many injuries in the team. So what is the situation with, Maguire, Lindelof, Axel Tuanzebe, is Varane, safe as well?
Yeah, we'll start with a couple of the obvious ones. Eric Bailly, he's went off to AFCON. Of course, last time out as well, he did complain of a muscle problem, so that kept him out of the Wolves game, so that's why he wasn't involved. With Harry Maguire, he also picked a knock up against Burnley. Ralph Rangnick said it was one of those injuries where he was able to complete the game, but post-match over that next 24 to 48 hours, and we talk about how sometimes injuries can evolve, in the heat of battle, when the adrenaline's flowed, you can shake off these knocks. But this was an impact injury on the chest. It doesn't sound as if it was too serious. The United manager was fairly optimistic that Maguire could make that round of fixtures, but he was, the day before made that decision that he couldn't recover. So again, whether he's risked in the FA Cup or not, he may have to be, again, out of necessity. But if not, we would certainly expect a return for the next round of Premier League fixtures. So that doesn't look to be too serious. Raphael Varane, we know, and we've banged this drum lots of times before. Players coming into this league, the Premier League, in terms of the dynamic nature, the high energy game, it takes a period of adaptation, and Raphael Varane was through in at the deep end, really, and he suffered a couple of little setbacks in terms of muscular problems, the last one being hamstring. He needs to be managed around these congested fixture periods and these tight turnarounds. And, we've seen prior to the Wolves game, Varane stepping out of that starting 11 and put on the bench. And that was just a case of the manager, looking after the player, making sure that he wasn't being overloaded. Because the last thing you do, you don't want that player to break down again, especially when they're coming off the back of a hamstring injury, which do have high re-injury and recurrence rates, particularly during that first 28-day period.
And so with the situation there, a lot of people expected, like I said, Man United to have this turnaround. And yes, they do have some interesting fixtures ahead. A lot of people said, they're easy ones. They have a sea of green from game week 24 to 27. But injuries plus tactics plus data, maybe they're not the team that we were hoping they would be. And we shall see. Ronaldo obviously is fantastic and he can turn up against anybody and everybody. But I can't remember where it was. I don't know if it was The Athletic or somewhere else, but there was a fantastic piece about how Ronaldo is both the creator and problem solver in so many situations at Manchester United. The final question for this week and maybe going forward over the next coming weeks, obviously, it won't be happening for a little while. Depends on the form of teams in the Cup of Nations. But how long do you expect before players, once they exit the tournament, whether it be at the start or the end, how long will it be for them to be back into their teams? Will they immediately be back that game week, or will they be handled with, I love the phrase that you say, kid gloves, and kind of handled quite carefully because it's a tournament and they might be overplayed?
Yeah, I think there's two considerations here. One is there's not going to be any blanket rule for an individual club or player. It will come down to that player's status within that team. Players such as maybe Mo Salah and Sadio Mane are imperative to Liverpool in terms of their title charge, if it still exists by then, and maybe Champions League. Teams like Watford, who've lost the likes of, I think it's Louza, Troost, Gong is a couple. Those teams that will need and require those players, then I expect them to be sort of thrust back into the first team limelight fairly quickly. How this tournament differs from typically what we would normally see in and around a World Cup or a European Championships or Copa America, for example, those tournaments impinge or infringe on maybe a player's close season, that recovery period, that period of rest where they use that to recharge their batteries. Whereas AFCON, it's stuck in the middle of a domestic campaign. And even if you consider maybe, from that first group game to potentially reaching that final, then players are only looking at a maximum of around about, I think it's 7 games. Now, 7 games over the course of a full month, comparatively speaking, that may be less than ordinarily that you'd play in domestic football. Under no circumstances, you certainly would, but this season, I know we've got the winter break. But if you look at, say, Liverpool, before Christmas, they were averaging a game every sort of 3 days. So in terms of will players need that period of rest and recovery? I don't think so. Maybe that little bit of time to sort of reacclimatize. You're going from the heat of Africa and the Cameroon to coming back to a bit of cold snap and potentially snow in the UK, but look, I expect players to be reintegrated fairly quickly. This is nothing new for them. They'll be pretty battle hardened. So I wouldn't be concerned too much with regards to managers maybe looking to protect those players. I think, we're coming to a stage of the season where really, you mightn't be able to afford to do that. It's, this is coming up to the business end of the campaign, and we all know that money talks, and teams need to be doing everything they can to get 3 points.
We're going to use Raj's favourite quote, risk versus reward. Love that. I think you'll appreciate the American accent there as well.
I wasn't sure if that was one of your Geordie ones.
You can just never tell. My accents are so fantastic. But in terms of it, our videos are always fantastic as well. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. Give the video a like. Do comment below, like we said at the start. Do ask any questions that you might have over this period, because we're kind of resting and reflecting, because it has been a very hectic Christmas schedule, but things are now a little bit more normal. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will see you again very, very soon.